day-to-day routine lives. Does anybody besides me have a little problem with today's scripture reading? I've always wrestled with this passage, have for years and years. I have a tendency to lean more toward verse 38, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. I can relate to that. But turning the other cheek, going the second mile, love your enemy, come on, admit it, that's some pretty tough stuff. Let me start with a true story. Just another skirmish in today's culture wars. In 1995, in a Colorado courthouse, a jury was deliberating on a murder trial. One of the members of the jury pulled out his Bible and read to his fellow jury members the following verse from the Old Testament book of Leviticus, chapter 24, verse 17, King James Version. He that killeth any man shall surely be put to death. And not long after that, after a short deliberation, the jury voted to impose the death penalty. Then the appeals began. The defense attorney argued that it had been improper for a member of the jury to read from a Bible in a jury room. The Bible, after all, was not one of the official volumes of the Colorado statutes. He called what the jury member had done an extraneous text, meaning foreign, not pertinent, irrelevant. He argued successfully. 10 years later, that's how long an appeal process takes sometimes. The Colorado Supreme Court downgraded the man's sentence from execution to life imprisonment without parole. Now that decision set off a firestorm of criticism. How dare that judge ban the Bible from the jury room? What an outrage. Doesn't the judge know that this is America, and here in America we are a Christian nation? Doesn't he know that the Bible is the foundation of our legal system? On TV shows, the phone lines lit up, and they stayed lit up for days. The news media had a field day. What few seemed to notice is that from a Christian point of view, the jury member completely misused the Bible. He read from Leviticus, saying a murderer must be put to death. Make the punishment fit the crime. What he failed to do was share what Jesus says about this passage. Jesus, you see, overrides or overrules the Leviticus command. Jesus admits that what the law of Israel says, that's what the law of Israel says. But then he tells his own disciples not to follow it. It's only one of a very few examples of Jesus overturning a law from the Hebrew Scriptures. Jesus tells his followers, now listen carefully here, he says, do not resist over evildoers. If someone slugs you on the right cheek, offer him your left. If someone steals a coat off your back, offer him your sweater as well. If anyone forces you to carry a burden for 1 mile, when you've reached the end of that mile, keep on walking. That last comment about walking the second mile would have really touched a nerve in Jesus' listeners. The hated Roman soldiers were used to calling Jewish men out of a crowd and saying, "Come here, Jewish boy, put on this heavy backpack and walk behind me for the next mile or so. You're going to be my mule today, my slave animal, my beast of burden." It was obviously shameful, humiliating. But it's also pretty common procedure back in those days of Roman military oppression. The most creepy, the worst Roman soldier from a distant land could indeed do such a thing to any Jew, even a distinguished rabbi. As you might guess, the Jews hated this sort of treatment. So Jesus' teaching is shocking and surprising. Not news to us, is it? It was shocking and surprising back in those days, and sadly, it's just as shocking and surprising today. To some of Jesus' listeners, must have seemed like he had a couple of screws loose. But as is usually the case with Jesus and his teaching, there is a certain ingenious psychology at work here. If you put on that Roman backpack, become a slave, then walk for a mile, grumbling all the way while letting it slide from your back just before that next mile marker, then what has happened? The Roman soldier has won, hasn't he? He has succeeded in making you his inferior, his beast of burden. He doesn't care if you grumble. For him, that's half the fun. I would just think, if you don't stop after that first mile, instead you go on for the second or more, and if you do it without grumbling, then you're going to have that soldier so confused he won't know what's going on. The whole structure of the world as he knows it, that structure that puts him higher than you in the imperial pecking order, all that no longer applies. You've taken a big leap right out of that pecking order. Now, some of you might think that going that second mile is a mark of completely obeying and serving the Master. But it's not. It's something quite different. It's a declaration of independence. Jesus is bringing on an entirely new program. The old one no longer applies. The old ethic in verse 38, you know, the one a lot of us are more comfortable with, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And this way of thinking has a lot of history in it. Just about every human culture, until Jesus comes along, has acted pretty much along those lines. And in spite of Jesus' teachings, a lot of people still act that way today. There's no doubt about it. Turning the other cheek is a tough practice. Not many of us succeed in living up to it. All it takes is a little flare-up of anger, and all the best intentions of living a Christ-like life go right out the window. You know how it goes. There are lots of incidents when we feel someone has trampled on our rights in large ways or small, it doesn't matter. We can all think of something regarding this winter, for example, that is maybe when we're driving. Someone will roar past us at 70 miles an hour, creating a whiteout, and then slow down and get right in front of us, causing that whiteout to continue on and on endlessly. Or how about somebody pulling out into an intersection without checking to see if any traffic is coming because the snowbanks are blocking their sight? Doesn't that drive you nuts? Doesn't it make you want to swing the wheel a little bit to the left as that jerk is passing us? Leaning on that accelerator just a little bit and go zooming past him or her, giving him or her a whiteout of his own. Come on now, be honest with yourselves. The urge for vengeance is universal, almost universal. We all feel its tug. We all hear its sneaky little whisper saying, are you going to let him get away with that? The problem is it's so easy to mix up justice and vengeance in our minds. We often imagine, for all practical purposes, that justice and vengeance are one and the same. They're not. The problem with casually accepting vengeance as simply the way the world works is that the effect of vengeance is not limited to the person it's directed at. It also affects the person seeking the vengeance as well. No one has said this better than preacher and author Frederick Buechner from the Lutheran tradition. In this little quotation, it kind of wraps it up in a neat package. Buechner says this: of the 7 deadly sins, anger is possibly the most fun. Different way to look at it. To lick your wounds, to smack your lips over grievances long past, to roll over your tongue the prospect of bitter confrontations still to come, to savor to the last toothsome morsel both the pain you are given and the pain you are giving back. In many ways, it is a feast fit for a king. The chief drawback is that what you are wolfing down is yourself. Ancient Chinese philosopher Confucius says much the same thing in a little saying that could easily fit into a fortune cookie. He says, if you devote your life to seeking revenge, dig 2 graves. Jesus knows this as he says to his disciples, turn the other cheek. He wants to save us from the damage and the hard work and all the misery of digging 2 graves. He wants to show us another way, a tough way to be sure, but the only way that truly leads to freedom. Amen. If you have any prayer requests,